Panem to the glorious reaping of District 12.
If there's one thing this franchise knows how to do, it's turn survival into spectacle, and this time, the games feel bigger, meaner, and far more personal. The moment I saw the latest footage from the Hunger Games Sunrise on the Reaping, one thing became crystal clear to me. This is not just another return to Panem. This looks like the chapter that could completely reframe how we see Haymitch Abernathy. And honestly, that alone makes this one of the most fascinating franchise releases of the year. Even if Haymitch would one day help guide Katniss Everdeen and Peeta Mellark toward victory, this story takes me back to the moment when he was never a mentor, never a legend, and definitely not the broken man we later came to know. Here, he's just a 16-year-old boy thrown into a nightmare designed to entertain the capital. And because this is the Second Quarter Quell, the brutality gets pushed even further. Instead of the usual 20 for tributes, the number is doubled. That means 48 children are sent into the arena. And suddenly the scale of the horror becomes impossible to ignore. What makes Sunrise on the Reaping hit differently for me is that I already know Haymitch survives. I know he wins. But in a franchise like this, survival has never meant escape. Winning has always come with a cost, and this prequel seems determined to show exactly how that cost shattered him from the inside out. That's where the real tension is. It's not about whether he lives. It's about what's left of him when it's over. As the countdown to release keeps getting shorter, anticipation is only getting louder. The film is set to arrive in theaters and IMAX this November, and Lionsgate just dropped a long new trailer that gives us a much better look at the 50th Hunger Games, and I have to say, this footage doesn't play like a routine franchise teaser. It feels massive, emotional, and strangely stylish in a way that sets it apart from earlier installments. Under the direction of Francis Lawrence, who has now become the defining visual architect of this series, the movie looks like it's stepping into a fresh era without losing the darkness that made Panem so unforgettable in the first place. That may be the most interesting balancing act here. At its core, this is still a tragic story. It's still about children being forced into a system built on cruelty, image, and control. But the new trailer presents it with a brighter, more polished, more theatrical energy that almost makes the danger feel more disturbing. Everything looks vivid, cinematic, and elevated, but beneath that surface is something ugly and deeply painful. Fans of Suzanne Collins' 2025 novel probably saw this tone coming, but seeing it translated to the screen like this gives the whole thing a very different weight, and the trailer really leans into that weight. To me, it plays less like a heroic origin story and more like a slow descent into emotional ruin. The film goes back to the 50th Hunger Games and puts Haymitch at the center, with Joseph Zada stepping into the role that Woody Harrelson made iconic. That alone is a risky move because Haymitch is one of those characters audiences already carry with them. But from what I'm seeing here, the movie doesn't seem interested in imitation. It looks like it wants to explain the damage, not just recreate the mannerisms. That's important because this chapter has to function as more than a prequel. It has to bridge to very different eras of Panem. On one side, there's the early political rot explored in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. On the other, there's the full-blown rebellion led by Katniss in the original saga. Sunrise on the Reaping seems built to sit right in the middle of that timeline, showing how one devastating chapter helped shape both the personal and political future of this world. And if the film lands that balance, it could end up being much more than franchise maintenance. It could be the missing emotional link. Joseph Zada leads the cast as Haymitch, but he's surrounded by a lineup that gives the film serious weight. Whitney Peak appears as Lenore Dove Baird, McKenna Grace plays Maysili Donner, and Ben Wong takes on Wyatt Callow. Then there's the capital side of the board, which may be just as compelling. Ralph Fiennes steps in as President Coriolanus Snow. Elle Fanning plays Effie Trinket. Kieran Culkin appears as Caesar Flickerman, and Jesse Plemons takes on Plutarch Heavensbee. Glenn Close and Billy Porter also join the cast as Drusilla and Magno. And just based on the names alone, this movie is clearly not aiming small. What I find especially smart is how this cast seems designed to pull in both longtime fans and newer audiences at the same time. If you know this world deeply, you immediately start connecting names, timelines, and future consequences. If you don't, the trailer still sells a high-stakes survival epic with style, tension, and a tragic character arc at its center. That kind of crossover appeal is exactly what a franchise prequel needs if it wants to matter instead of just exist. The latest footage also has a horror edge that I really didn't expect to feel this strong. There's dread in the way the arena is framed, in the faces of the tributes, and in the sense that this isn't just a contest. It's a machine built to crush identity and hope. And maybe that's why Haymitch's story works so well here. He isn't stepping into glory. He's walking into something designed to break him. Knowing the man he becomes later only makes every moment feel heavier. The release date is set for November 20th, 2026, which fits the franchise tradition perfectly. Hunger Games movies have long claimed that mid to late November window, and from a box office perspective, it makes a lot of sense. It lands right before Thanksgiving, one of the strongest movie-going periods of the year. But this time, the competition looks intense, with titles like Godzilla Minus Zero, Ebenezer: A Christmas Carol, and Narnia the Magician's Nephew also aiming for that same month. So yes, the runway is strong, but the fight for attention will be real. Still, this franchise has earned the benefit of the doubt. Across 5 films, The Hunger Games has brought in about $3.3 billion worldwide, and that kind of history doesn't happen by accident. Audiences show up for Panem because the series usually understands how to combine spectacle with emotional stakes. And with a reported budget north of $150 million, Lionsgate clearly believes Sunrise on the Reaping can deliver as another major event film. Not just a nostalgia play. For me, that's the biggest reason this movie matters. It's not simply going back to familiar territory. It's taking one of the most beloved and tragic characters in the series and finally asking the question that's been hanging over him for years. What exactly happened to Haymitch Abernathy before he became the man we met? If this film answers that with the intensity, intelligence, and heartbreak the trailer is promising, then Panem may be about to hurt all over again, and honestly, that may be exactly why fans are going to show up. Because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about victory, they're about what victory destroys. This one looks ready to prove that in brutal fashion. The Hunger Games: Sunrise on the Reaping arrives in theaters on November 20th, 2026, and if this trailer is any sign, we're not just heading back into the arena, we're heading into one of the franchise's darkest emotional chapters yet. Stay with me, because when this movie finally hits, we're going to have a lot to talk about. Until next time, keep your eyes on the screen and your expectations high.